Hello, everyone. Oh. Welcome to this side event. I was a bit worried that we will get one of those rooms which a lot of sunlight would come in and it would be hot and we all would feel asleep. But I'm happy that this room is nice and cold. And I welcome you all to today's side event. The side event is on the operationalization of the mechanism, independent investigative mechanism for Afghanistan that was established by the Human Rights Council last year in September. And the issue of accountability and justice is the operationalization of this mechanism plus the issue of accountability for Afghanistan does not make sense in isolation. We are seeing in the worldwide that the efforts for justice and accountability has been sidelined. We can see the examples from this building, from the UN, that suffer from the lack of funding and the liquidity crisis. And I'm very happy today that I am speaking with all of you as the representative of your states, as representing the human rights issues of different countries in this building and its very important institutions. The reason that I said that the accountability for Afghanistan does not make the sense in isolation is that if we have the crisis within the UN for funding, Afghanistan will also not be sufficiently funded. That's why I request all of you that this message should be considered with all of you. Now, without delay, I would hand over the stage to Ambassador Andisha and ask him to for the welcoming remarks for this event, and also tell us about how the comprehensive mandate of this mechanism can help the accountability and justice processes in Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I think I'll need to go quickly because we have a fairly large panel, and I'm sure the expert discussions will be in the panel. I think preparation for future of accountability, prevention, and recommendation for the Afghanistan's independent investigative mechanism is a very timely event that we have here, since Afghanistan in this round is not in the main agenda of this session. So I think the main question is that having a resolution, of course, needed a lot of efforts and activities and real advocacy by many of you sitting here, but to operationalize it, to put the meat in the bone and to make it what we all expect is another challenge, and I'm glad that we all gather here to do that. So I think in one hand, we are very lucky, being in Geneva and having both the human rights institutions and organizations, but also very premier research institutions here. We have the Graduate Institute, we have the Human Rights Academy to contribute also to the other side of it. And today, I think what we will discuss is a research project by some of our young researchers. I think that adds also an element to the recommendations. The overall, I think, map is very clear for us, what we want, so what the people of Afghanistan wants, and also what the Afghan human rights defenders, they want. I think the major thing is for the victims and for survivors. I think it has to be survivor-based, and victims have to have a clear voice in this. So I think true accountability cannot happen in a vacuum, and that is important. For the mission of Afghanistan, and I'm sure for member states who have put the energy together, and here I need also to thank the EU for its effort and colleagues here that made this possible. I think having a unified coalition is important, to coordinate, to bring both the resources, both political and financial together to make this possible, because there is so many competing agendas here in Geneva. So I think that's another thing which we do. And the last but not least, I think again for Afghanistan, the most important thing is that in one hand it looks at the ending, hopefully, impunity of past 50 years, because in Afghanistan we have we had these 5 decades of violence and wars and invasions, and it created layers of victims and perpetrators, and it's becoming so very difficult. And particularly, in the recently the issues with the Taliban's gender apartheid, with the problems of education and human rights, which is really deteriorating in the country. I think that's one aspect, but the most important one, again, for future is that we need to go through some sort of transitional justice in that country, and this builds a foundation based on evidence, based on research, but also based on the experiences of survivals and victim families and the others. So how it could help feed the transitional justice, and then how it could really, at the end, help a reconciliation process for that country. Because not to have a reconciliation, we have the very difficult experience of that in 2001 and 1991. Every time one phase of violence ends, we always stuck in this question of reconciliation and transitional justice. So hopefully, it could serve both immediate victim and judicial accountability, but also it could also help us to move into a reconciliation process for the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Andesha, for your very comprehensive remarks. Now I'd like to give the floor to Sergio Poliferoni Benedete from the Inquiry Branch of the Office of the High Commissioner to give us an update on what steps has been taken so far since the establishment of this mechanism. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all participants for the invitation. And it's a pleasure to be here to provide this update, which I hope will provide the basis for a more substantive discussion. But we thought it would probably be good to give you an idea of where we are at this stage. Just to first of all to reiterate that the mechanism will operate independently when it formally commences its work. The role of OCHR, the Office of Legal Affairs, and other secretarial entities is to take, at this stage, to take steps to and to ensure that preparatory work is carried out for the mechanism to become operational. Accordingly, key strategic decisions such as investigative priorities, modalities of engagement with civil society, member states, and even the de facto authority will be decided by the mechanism itself and its future leadership. So when it comes to steps that we have taken so far, I think the main milestone so far is obviously the approval by the Secretary General of the terms of reference of the mechanism, institutional terms of reference of the mechanism. The approval was followed by extensive consultations led by OCHR in close cooperation with the Office of Legal Affairs, where mechanisms, NGOs, civil society actors, both international and national, were consulted. And the idea of these terms of reference is to provide the operational and strategic framework for the mechanism work. The terms of reference define its mandate and guiding principles while preserving the flexibility necessary for the mechanism to independently determine its priorities and investigative lines of inquiry, methodologies, and partnership. So the idea was to provide these broad parameters. As you may have seen, the terms of reference highlight the importance of on gender, age-sensitive approaches, and also a survivor-centered approach. We tried to make sure that that was included there, and was obviously universal feedback from all those consulted. It's also at the end, the final version of terms of reference include also the need for the mechanism to establish close engagement with civil society, secure reporting channels, strict confidentiality and data protection standards, and appropriate protection measures for victims, witnesses, and others who cooperate with the mechanism. The terms of reference, of course, include or provide for coordination with the Special Rapporteur on Afghanistan, as mandated by the resolution. So it was, in a nutshell, we tried to apply lessons learned from other mechanisms, while at the same time not to say reinvent the wheel. So, but we hope that the balance was struck, and it was good that the Secretary General approved them in March. So I think that's the institutional terms of reference of the mechanism. When it comes to more down-to-earth issues, so like operationalization and resources, just a quick reminder for those who may not know, the Office of the High Commissioner, when we submitted the request for resources associated with this mandate, we requested 42 posts, of which, and the idea was to bring them in a phased manner. So the idea was to bring 14, initially for 14 posts in 2026, 15 in 2027, and 13 in 2028. There is already a structure for the mechanism, which is approved in the UN, and includes an executive's office, collection, analysis, and preservation units, information management. So to some extent, or to a great extent, these structures that we have come up with is the result of consultation and analysis with other mechanisms, and trying to apply lessons learned from the activities and work of the independent mechanisms that are already existing. So that's the request. At the end, what happened is in December 2025, the General Assembly approved the mechanism initial budget, but only for 2026, and that included 10 posts out of the 14 that we requested. And it was also the budget, financial bodies in the UN requested that OCHR then, for the mechanism, justify everything in 2027, justifies and explains and submits a separate request on the position and resources that we will need for the mechanism. As a result of this request, a big part of what the office is doing now is the preparation, finalization of the 2027 budget for the mechanism, which is in the UN. That process starts now, but also significant, substantive, and ongoing engagement with financial mechanisms within the UN to defend the request. In spite of the liquidity crisis and the financial issue, that at the end, the mechanism has already been allocated 60% of its budget for 2026. So it's not that running zero. It's better than we expected, and this could be even 80% by the end of the year. This is a projection, but it's 60% up to now. So I think we think that's enough for the mechanism to start working. As you may know, there's also a dedicated trust fund was established for voluntary contributions, and in early 2026. The last time, which as of now, there has been only one contribution of $10,000, but several member states have expressed their willingness and commitment to support the mechanism through the trust fund. So on that front, we're also, I dare to be relatively optimistic. So I think let me now move to where we are with staffing. To be honest, has been slightly challenging, but just to explain, the project we took was to do it a phased approach, And the objective still remains to fill all the positions by the position for 2026, so the 10 positions that we got approved by the end of the year. And we expect the onboarding of the new staff to the initial staff to start in this month in July. We have to overcome a small issue that we have inside the UN Secretariat, which is that the so-called hiring freeze. There is a recruitment freeze for regular budget position, but that's not the end of it. Exceptions can be requested and granted. So we are optimistic that given that this is an important and new mandate, the case for it to be, and is quite clear, and the request has already been made. So it's only actually being decided once the recruitment is finalized. So on that one, we are relatively optimistic. So yeah, so then one of the reasons there was a bit of a phased approach also is we at the moment really know how much money the mechanism has, like not at the beginning of the year, but we know every 3 months. It's like little by little we know how much we will have. So as with other parts of the Secretariat, but the approach has been decided is to be relatively conservative on how many positions are open, because we cannot commit to them to expenses that then probably cannot be paid afterwards. So the uncertainty about the budgetary situation does has an impact on how fast we can go, but also a big part of the reason why the phased approach is taken is taking into account the independence of the mechanism. With that, I mean that we expect, we hope, and we want the head of the mechanism to make most of the key decisions. So the idea is to have now most of the recruitment processes ready for when the head arrives, and he or she then will take those decisions. So is OECHR, as I could say, caretaker of this, together with the Office of Legal Affairs of this mandate, still respects and wants to make sure that the decisions are taken by the head when he or she is appointed. And so coming back to the issue, so the head is the priority. We are working on it. The office is working on it, but it is true that it's a senior leadership appointment outside the UN, and that requires additional layers and additional, but it's moving forward, and we are optimistic that sometime in the third quarter of the year, probably this could happen, the latest. So yeah, just to summarize, we continue working with and yeah, just one more thing, this appointment is made by the Secretary General, and is being carried out or managed by the office, but also by the Office of Legal Affairs. So it's not an OCHR decision of its own. One last point that I would like to make is that throughout this process, we have been in touch and continue to be in touch with civil society actors. And we can only say, but thank you for the input and that we have received, and for the support that it comes across very clearly that the importance that is given to this mandate, and the great expectation that we have, that a civil society actor has on it. And we are very thankful for the technical expertise and advice that we get. The same with the mechanism, which have been also consulted at key steps of the process, and they have provided advice. And I may say, of course, the special rapporteur who have guided us throughout this process with this knowledge of the country, but also on how it interacts with it. So to conclude, just to say that we will continue, and the process is moving forward, and we will like to rest assured that the office understands the importance and this mechanism, how crucial it is, and for Afghan, and what a lot of work it took to actually get it approved. So we'll continue working hard to make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergio, for your input. Before I give it to you, Richard, I would, Ambassador Andesha mentioned about the research that was carried out by the 3 students of the Graduate Institute. Their names are Sarah Chaudhry, Linda Bartzluzzi, Lucia Lopez. I'd like to give it to you. You have 7 minutes. Please share with us the main findings you had in this research and also a few of the recommendations. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the co-organizers and the co-sponsors for convening this discussion. We are master's students from the Geneva Graduate Institute, and this research was conducted under the supervision of Dr. Claire Somerville and in partnership with the Center for Human Rights Advocacy. Over the course of this project, we've spoken with practitioners from international investigative mechanisms, experts in transitional and transformative justice, as well as on the codification of apartheid as a crime, and most importantly, a woman human rights activist living inside Afghanistan. As an all-woman team, this project holds particular significance for us, and we're honored to share and amplify the work and courage of Afghanistan's women and girls who continue to advocate for their rights under extremely challenging circumstances. It is with that perspective in mind that we'd like to share our findings and recommendations. The establishment of the IMMA by the Human Rights Council in October 2025 is a historic step, but the mechanism's effectiveness is only as strong as its relationship with the people that it serves. In this respect, we recommend that the mechanism first lay the groundwork to establishing institutional clarity and operationalizing gender-competent, victim and survivor-centered, intersectional, and trauma-informed approaches from the outset. Second, we recommend that the mechanism develop an adaptive victim, survivor, and civil society engagement strategy built around 3 pillars. The first pillar is inclusive engagement and continuous outreach. Engagement should represent the country's diverse knowledge and experience, including all regions, ethnicities, religions, languages, genders, etc. Outreach must extend beyond urban and diaspora civil society networks to intentionally include rural and remote communities. This means reaching the full breadth of Afghanistan's communities through accessible participation methods. In practice, this means structured collaboration with local networks, recognizing their essential role in information and evidence collection, outreach, and trust building with victims and survivors. The second pillar is meaningful inclusion of local expertise and affected communities in decision-making through layered consultation that reflects their different roles, perspectives, and contributions, particularly given the overlapping nature of actors in the Afghanistan context. The third pillar is maintaining clear institutional independence and defined roles in all CSO engagement, ensuring that civil society cooperation complements and supports rather than substitutes core functions and avoids perceived alignment with specific actors. I will now hand it over to my colleague.
Thank you. With this essential foundation, I will thus turn to our next key recommendation for the mechanism. It should be capable of preparing for multiple future diverse accountability initiatives by prioritizing flexibility and long-term readiness, by creating a strong central system to store information and evidence, and keeping the overall strategy adaptable so the mechanism can respond to new opportunities for justice as they arise. This can include, but is not limited to, supporting processes of the International Criminal Court and International Court of Justice, supporting future cases on the basis of the principle of universal jurisdiction or other applicable forms of extraterritorial jurisdiction, and supporting future transitional justice processes. Resolution 60-2 itself stresses a comprehensive approach. For civil society, a key objective is to prepare from now for such a comprehensive approach. We recommend facilitating the connection, participation, and engagement of the people of Afghanistan to international human rights mechanism, courts, and all other applicable fora by providing them as much legal, language, technical, social, health, mental health, and other forms of support as possible, and building their capacity to participate and engage effectively. However, we reflected in our research on past transitional justice approaches, and we discovered such models are inadequate to confront structural and deeply rooted system of oppression, including gender apartheid. In this sense, what we consider the most important aspect of this project is the potential of transformative justice for the people of Afghanistan. The mechanism should, in our view, be understood not only as an accountability tool, but also as a preventive and transformative institution. Transformative justice seeks to address the social, political, and economic structures that allow oppression to continue. It seeks to change the conditions that make such violation and abuses possible in the first place, allowing for the achievement of lasting change for future generations. I would now like to hand it over to my colleague, who will present our main recommendation for the mechanism, state, and civil society.
Thank you. We therefore recommend that the mechanism first pre-survival engagement as a part of a broader strategy aimed at restoring dignity, strengthening agency, and supporting survivors as active participants in processes of accountability, prevention, and social transformation. Second, operationalize inclusivity from the beginning, including by recruiting a significant portion of staff from diverse regions, ethnicities, genders, and expertise across Afghanistan, ensuring all communities are fairly represented within the mechanism staff. Third, draw upon experience from Syria and Myanmar by adopting a structured investigation approach to examine discriminatory structural drivers of violation and abuses so that justice processes are able to address these structural drivers so as to maximize the contribution that justice processes can make to building sustainable foundation for peace. For states, we recommend adopting a long-term approach through, first, committing sustained financial, technical, and diplomatic support to the newly established mechanism and ensure this support is maintained over the long term. Second, establish a dedicated victim and survivor fund to enable safe, sustained, full, effective, and meaningful leadership and participation in transformative justice efforts. Third, prioritize long-term flexible funding and support for direct partnership with locally rooted civil society structure, including women-led organizations, transferring ownership of transformative justice initiatives to these communities. Finally, for civil societies, focus on empowering the people of Afghanistan, particularly women, recognizing them as active agents of change, organizers, and sources of expertise to advocate for and shape the transformative justice processes they envision, including by systematically consulting a diverse range of communities, conducting a large-scale systematic mapping of priorities, and supporting paths for this realization. We would like to close by quoting a woman rights activist for Afghanistan we interviewed for this project, who put it better than we ever could. This approach must be shaped by Afghanistan women's own priorities. We know what we need. Justice must be built with us, not for us. Only then can repair and rebuilding reflect our dignity and our future. That is the standard against, which we believe that mechanism and every actor in this room, online, and working on human rights in Afghanistan should measure its work. Thank you, and we look forward for the rest of the discussion.
Thank you so much for sharing the finding of the research with all of us. I hope to read the full report and also share it with everyone who is in the room. Thank you. So now it's time, Richard, for you. Tell us, how do you think your mandate with the new mechanism that's going to be established, hopefully soon, plus the other entities, UN entities and UNAMA, how do we coordinate our efforts together so that it can result in some achievements for justice and accountability in Afghanistan? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Syed. Many thanks to the organizers and co-sponsors, and special thanks to the previous speakers, in particular those from the Graduate Institute who presented your really interesting research. And I spoke yesterday at another event about the importance of research, the importance of knowledge manufacture, and we need more. But this is a really important first step. And I would like to say I have always welcomed the mechanism and as an important tool that complements others and will strengthen the overall accountability toolkit, of which there are several components. I'd also like to make the comment that we certainly need to aim, in my view, for transformative justice. At the core of that is certainly putting victims and survivors first. I would also add, however, that breaking the cycles of violence that have afflicted Afghanistan for generations to the point that there's no one under the age of 55 that can remember a time of peace, requires ending the culture of impunity and bringing some of the perpetrators to justice. My mandate stands ready to support the work of the mechanism, including through the body of analysis we've built already on human rights violations, the evidence that we have gathered and will continue to gather, and the networks of Afghan women and survivors we continue to work with. So I've talked, thank you for your question, Syed, about cooperation. I think it's extremely important that we see the mechanism. We keep calling it the mechanism. IAM as a key tool, but just one of a toolkit that exists already, noting that there is the special rapporteur mandate, there is the ICC investigation, there's UNAMA, there are treaty bodies, other mandates, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. There might be a case at the ICJ. There might be progress on gender apartheid. All of these add up to a comprehensive approach. And I agree, we need to coordinate that approach and see what each can contribute to the other within overall strategy. And I look forward to the operationalization at the earliest opportunity. And thank you for your briefing, Sergio. And in particular, I look forward to cooperating with the head of the mechanism and the staff when they are appointed. I echo the views of others that gender and actually SOGI experience and expertise needs to be built in from the outset. That the methodology must be survivor-centered and attend to intersecting forms of discrimination and oppression. And that Afghan women and girls must be treated not only as sources of evidence, but as participants in the pursuit of justice. And how the mechanism orders its priorities is for the mechanism to decide. But I certainly support those who call for very intensive consultation with all stakeholders, especially Afghans, and including those who are living in Afghanistan. I just move on to the issue of resources, if I may. We've heard from Sergio where we are right now, and I would call on member states and others to support the mechanism, not only politically, but financially as well. In this regard, I have looked at the staffing table of the mechanism, and I do have a few observations to make at this stage. As far as I can see, the staffing table doesn't yet include specific gender expertise. I think that's a gap that ought to be filled, or at least, and child rights expertise for that matter, at least specialists in inclusiveness need to be on the staff. I think I have found from my own mandate that having specialists, for example, on gender, makes a huge difference. It's good to have generalists. I'm not against generalists. I'm one myself. But I think what we're learning more and more is that in-depth expertise and advice is necessary. I also noted that at this stage, there's no deputy. And I guess my observation would be that I believe the head of the mechanism is extremely important, and she will have her hands full, or they will have their hands full with a lot of, I would say, kind of external work with donors, with civil society, and I expect the head of the mechanism to take personal responsibility for reaching out. And in an organization like that, I hope that that's a strategic focus is really very carefully thought through. So I think there's certainly room to divide that work up with the operational work, and perhaps the appointment of a deputy might help the head remain strategic and engaged externally, especially with civil society and member states. I also do note, and I think we should all remember, and Sergio is very clear about this, this mechanism, although it will be set up incrementally, but even when it reaches its peak, which will be 2029, it will only be a fraction of the size of the other mechanisms that are similar, the one on Syria and the one on Myanmar. So I know that it is what it is, but I think we do need to understand that and perhaps note this is, if we're talking about the regular budget of the UN, it may not be sufficient. In 2029, the budget is expected to be 9,335,000. And in 2026, both Myanmar and Syria in particular have much bigger budgets than that. We know that resources are tight, and I'm fully in favor of the synergies and efficiencies that can be created through the experience from the past. But at the same time, and it was actually flagged at the time the mechanism was set up, that it might be a little bit of a investigative mechanism light. But I think it's my responsibility maybe just to remind people, don't make it too light so that it can't do its work. And also ensure that the balance between support staff and substantive staff allows the mechanism to have the sufficient resources to undertake the work that it's required to do. So I'll wrap up with that, perhaps just reiterating that I look forward to the moment when the mechanism will be operational. Until then, I continue to undertake my own work, and my mandate, unusually for a special rapporteur, includes investigation and documentation and preservation of information and evidence. Since the mechanism might take a while to become fully operational, I would also respectfully request that I am sufficiently resourced in my own mandate to continue to do this work and also contribute to the overall thinking about transitional or transformative justice, continue to make reports that are substantive to the Human Rights Council and the General Assembly. And note that the Special Rapporteur is expected, and under the current resolution, to continue, and that the two mechanisms will work together in a complementary fashion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard, for your remarks on the coordination. And now two notifications for your information. One is that we will have this room 10 minutes extra. We are a bit late. The second notification is that today from 4 to 6, we will be gathering in front of the Palais des Nations. We have one of our colleagues who has put a tent on, and we will hopefully have some music as well. We have our musician Arash is also here in this event, so he will be singing with us today. So I hope most of you will be able to join us today there as well. Now I'd like to ask Atifa Tayyib to tell us how Afghan human rights defenders can meaningfully contribute and are protected and towards the operationalization of this mechanism, and what are your some of the recommendations for future work? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to begin by thanking the organizers of this side event for this timely and important program. And it's a true privilege for me to join the panelists and this panel, for most of them who have played very important role in advancing the human rights and accountability efforts for Afghanistan. We are always thankful for all the efforts you put. I don't want to go to the situation and explain everything is going on in Afghanistan. All of us know this, but I want to start with a simple observation. Over last 5 years, women of Afghanistan have been asked to do 3 things simultaneously. They have, while they are they have been asked to survive the violence of the Taliban. They have been asked to document all the violations in Afghanistan and also advocate against these violations. Or sometimes most of the time they did this voluntarily because they feel the responsibility and they are the victims of this violation in Afghanistan. Very few groups in the world are having these burdens on their shoulders at the same time. The recent events in Herat province, where I come from, very clearly illustrate this situation. While women and girls were detained and harassed during the enforcement of the restrictive policies by the Taliban, they tried to, while women experienced this situation themselves, they tried to document the situation, record videos, photos, inform media, and also human rights organization. At the same time, women, families, men, and also people from different communities came together, wanted to raise their voices and wanted to demand accountability and dignity at the same time. So in other words, I can say that women in Afghanistan are survivors while they're victims at the same time, and they are documenters and they are advocates for their rights alone. So this reality shapes how we think about the protection, participation, and accountability in Afghanistan. Because women in Afghanistan are not only the beneficiaries of this accountability mechanism or the efforts for accountability. Actually, they are main actors to sustain efforts for documentation, advocacy, and also accountability. They are the primary source of evidence. The many reports that we have witnessed and we have seen that they are launched, and also the discussions that we have in different forums, in different organizations, different levels, they are because of the resistance of women in Afghanistan, because they are doing their best. They go through enormous risks and they try to document all these violations in Afghanistan. So the question is not that whether women in Afghanistan are doing their best, are doing enough. But yes, they are doing, but the question is the international community, all relevant organizations are doing their best to protect women and people in Afghanistan for this accountability mechanism and these efforts are depend to and rely on. So we know about violations in Afghanistan in many, more than many other crises in Afghanistan. Special Rapporteur always has documented this systematic discrimination, persecution in Afghanistan, the arbitrary detention, and all the restrictions that women go through them. The UN Women has described Afghanistan as one of the most serious women's rights crises in the world. Many internal national organizations such as HRD+, CTPG, and also Rawadari Center for Human Rights Advocacy, and many other organizations. Tomorrow, we have another side event by Women First, and we see that they are launching their reports. And this shows that we do not lack information about the situation in Afghanistan. Something which is lacking is the gap between the evidence that people create, the reports that we have about Afghanistan, and the consequences of this situation we do, and the concrete actions that organizations are taking in this regard. So when we see through the progress of violence in Afghanistan, we see it started from ban on education in 2021, and then it went to deepen restrictions, rights are disappeared in Afghanistan, and women are totally excluded from public lives. So it shows that one action, one restriction and violation in Afghanistan paved the way for the other restriction in Afghanistan and opened the condition and created the condition for the next one. So that is why I believe that we should stop looking at violations as separate incidents in Afghanistan, because we are facing and witnessing a system of repression in Afghanistan. They are not separate incidents. So the way that we respond to a system of repression is different to the way that we respond to separate incidents in Afghanistan. So another research from Hamra Initiative documents the situation and the expanding number of madrasas in Afghanistan. So it is not just the number of madrasas that are increasing from 5,000 in 2000, or before the collapse of the Republic, to 23,000 madrasas and institutions in 2025. It shows how they are trying to make institutional and make the gender discrimination in these institutions, and they are embedded in these institutions, which affects the future generations, because when these institutions become normalized, they inherit this as a normal thing in Afghanistan. So that is why accountability must be linked to the prevention and also to the protection of people who are inside Afghanistan and who are doing the advocacy for the people. So at the end, I would like to conclude with some of the recommendations. Firstly, as we all are happy and grateful for the mechanism that is for Afghanistan, but we shouldn't think that this investigative mechanism is something about future prosecutions. It is about, or it should be seen as something that tells victims that you have not been forgotten, tell the perpetrators that you are being watched, and also for the future violations that for the future generation, that violation cannot be or is not acceptable. So it is important that the investigative mechanism for Afghanistan is rapidly funded, adequately funded, and also through the trust fund, contribution to its trust funding, and the systematic engagement with civil society organizations, with women organizations, between these organizations and also the accountability mechanism. So we ensure that the evidence and the documentation is preserved and also used effectively in this regard. And also the funding for women-led organizations who want to work at national and international level. So women in Afghanistan don't want to be just or merely part of the discussions. They want to be involved and be part of the decision-making about the discussion and about the future of their countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Atafa Tayyab, for your very good remarks. I think we are a bit late, but with the time. But I'd like to ask now Mrs. Antonia Mulvey, who is former UN investigator for international crimes and visiting scholar at London School of Economics and Columbia University, and she's at the moment executive director with Legal Action Worldwide. The question to you, Mrs. Mulvey, is that we spoke about victim survivor-centered approach for so many times. What does it mean? how civil society can play a role so that this is considered.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you very much to the organisers. For those of you who don't know us, we're a frontline women-led organisation that worked in conflict and crisis situations and soon Afghanistan. And we represent thousands of victims and survivors of human rights violations and international crimes. Many of them are women and children, and many of them are asking for justice and accountability. Many of them want to go to court, not all of them, but I'm going to focus on the courts because that's what we're looking at today, and how I believe that if civil society frontline organisations work with victims and survivors and UN mechanisms and member states, we can achieve successes even in a world where today, let's be clear, international law is being daily violated. So first of all, let's just look at something positive. In the last 2 years, we've had 324 favourable decisions in national, regional and international courts on behalf of those we represent. Today, we've got very little time. I'm going to focus on 2 key issues. One, using universal jurisdiction, and the International Court of Justice. Now, using universal jurisdiction, if we don't file cases, then the prosecutors cannot open investigations. In the vast majority of universal jurisdictions, it is civil society who have filed those criminal complaints. And it will be the same situation for the mechanism. They cannot submit evidence unless those criminal complaints have been filed. I'm going to give you specific examples related to the Rohingya, where we represent hundreds of Rohingya in their quest for justice for the crimes that took place in Myanmar. Now, in a civil society organization filed a case in Buenos Aires arguing genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes took place. That was in 22. In 23, we took 7 survivors, victims, depends how they refer to themselves, to give in-person evidence at the court. 6 of them were women, and the majority of them had either suffered from sexual violence or they had witnessed it. They gave extraordinarily powerful evidence in person at the court. Following that, plus 1,000 pieces of evidence that was submitted by the Myanmar mechanism, resulted in 2024 of the judge requesting and ordering 25 arrest warrants against senior Myanmar officials, and that 20 of those have now been referred to Interpol. Will they be arrested? Maybe not today, but the world has got smaller. We do not know what will happen tomorrow. Look at the situation of Syria. And also we have a suspect tracking program, all legal, where we can track individuals where they're moving to. And this is very important because we also want to see those arrest warrants being implemented. Secondly, the International Court of Justice, and we have heard, and there's some states sitting around the table that have initiated proceedings under the breach of CEDAW. Congratulations to you. A long way to go. But I just want to take you for a moment to the International Court of Justice, to the breach of the Genocide Convention, of the case of Gambia versus Myanmar, where I was sitting in the court, part of the Gambia delegation. In January of this year, we had a 3-week hearing. We represented the victims and the witnesses that gave in-person evidence. It was the first genocide case in more than a decade. The court staff told us we have rarely ever seen individuals give evidence of this nature. Now, why was it so important? Because one of Myanmar's main arguments is the crimes did not take place, they're exaggerated, we can't rely on the witness statements, many of them were redacted. So having individuals stand there, women again, who recounted the worst day of their lives was absolutely vital. Now, of course, we do not know what the court will find, but we are cautiously optimistic that Myanmar will be found liable for genocide, either partially or in full. When did our work start on that case? Immediately after the provisional measures hearing, and we started working with Gambia for 7 years, and there's a lot of lessons that can be learnt of how to work with a mechanism. We also submitted a lot of evidence in that case, 12 statements from them, 48 statements from us were submitted to the court. How, if we work together, I believe we can see successes. And finally, just a note on the International Criminal Court, because we have a whole justice ecosystem working here. We have been working with the victims and survivors. They want the International Criminal Court to work. When Karim Khan, the prosecutor at that time. When the arrest warrant was requested for the Commander-in-Chief for Myanmar, he called us to say thank you very much for your work with the victims and survivors, which has contributed to our request for that arrest warrant. So it's absolutely vital that not only civil society and women-led organisations are taking the lead, but how these systems are working together, and that coordination is very important. And I believe that, yes, impunity breeds further violence, so let's end that impunity and be taking further cases. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antonia, for your very brave statement. Now I have to... I have to apologize to all of you just for not being able to give you the floor for question and answer. But because we are short on time, I also want to thank the Afghanistan mission for hosting this event, and also all of the co-sponsors and co-organizers. I will not name them, but I will also thank the Embassy of Austria here in Geneva and the Ambassador Alexander Kement for coming here and listening and sitting with us today. And I would like to give the floor to you to give the final remarks, and your probably pledge your support to this event to us. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Good afternoon to all colleagues. I'm also very sorry that because I'm speaking now, and time is so short that there was no chance for a proper discussion. But and I'm going to cut my remarks short because we're short on time. So first of all, thank you so much for the very insightful comments. Also, thank the students for the comments, which I thought were really good. So the operationalization of the mechanism is crucial to bring tangible justice one step closer to the people of Afghanistan. In particular, of course, women and girls, minorities, former government officials, journalists, human rights defenders, and others who have been subjected to systematic and targeted repression and abuses. It also sends a very important political message that the international community continues to be committed to sustaining a dedicated institutional response about the serious abuses in Afghanistan, and also to preserving pathways for accountability. The location of the mechanism in Vienna positions it in an established hub for multilateral cooperation and international justice. A key strength of the mechanism is its potential to embed a survivor-centered, agenda-responsive approach. And here I want to echo the comments made by Richard before, that it's really important that the victims and survivors are not merely treated as sources of information, but as right holders whose experiences shape accountability, priorities, and evidentiary strategies. So we are really very encouraged in this context by the leadership and sustained engagement of civil society from Afghanistan, whose advocacy is instrumental in ensuring that these principles are at the core of the work of the mechanism. The mechanism can serve as a bridge between human rights documentation and international criminal law standards, helping to transform years of evidence gathering into pathways for future judicial processes. Ultimately, the success of the mechanism will depend not only on its technical capability, but of course on the sustained political support from states. And accountability for Afghanistan must remain a priority for the international agenda, both as a matter of justice for the victims and as a prerequisite for any future peace grounded in the respect for human rights and the rule of law. So with this slightly shortened concluding remarks, I want to thank all the excellent speakers, and also specifically for everybody turning out in great numbers on this important topic. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I want to thank you, all of you, as well, for coming here and participating in this event. I hope that event like this would contribute to the situation in Afghanistan and break the silence, the cycle of conflict and impunity, and we will have some level of justice and accountability in Afghanistan. Thank you all.
Thank you.